Welcome back to Even Tacos Fall Apart, the podcast where we embrace the messy side of life with open hearts and open minds. I'm MommaFoxFire, and I am thrilled to have you joining me once again on this roller coaster of real talk, vulnerability, and finding the humor even in the darkness. That's the heart and soul of this podcast, talking about the gritty, the challenging, the downright messy parts of life. So today we're covering a topic that's both tender and empowering, and that's parenting after loss. It's a journey filled with grief, growth, and the raw reality of navigating the complexity of parenthood amidst the shadows of loss. You might be a seasoned parent, you might be a soon-to-be parent, or maybe you're someone who is simply intrigued by the profound and varied tapestry of human experience. Whatever brings you to my little corner of the podcast universe, I am thrilled that you're here today. In just a moment, you'll hear from Michelle Valiukenas, who joined me to share her insights, experiences, and the incredible work she's doing to support families dealing with pregnancy complications and loss. We'll be chatting about everything from the financial strains families face during high-risk pregnancies to breaking generational cycles of hardship and the profound impact of sharing our stories. So buckle up, grab your favorite drink to hydrate with, and let's dive into a conversation that's not just about parenting after loss, but embracing the resilience, growth, and the occasional messy taco in the beautiful journey of life. Stick around, you won't want to miss this one. Perfect. Okay. Hello, everyone. Welcome to another Mental Health Monday. I am super excited for today's conversation. It's going to be a really good one. We're going to be talking about parenting after loss. So if you have any questions about parenting after loss, feel free to pop them into the chat, whether you're watching on Twitch or you're watching on YouTube. Feel free to pop those onto the chat, and I will catch them and make sure that we ask them while we're live. I do have a question queue open. If you have one, you can type exclamation point, the letter Q, follow it with your question in the chat, and that'll pop it into a different spot where I can see it and notice it a little better. So if you want to help me out, you can do it that way. But otherwise, just put them into the chat. So really happy to have Michelle. You just told me how to say it. Valiukenas?
Yes.
Okay, yep. Very good. Michelle Valiukenas with us today. And I am so honored that she is willing to share her story. I think this is going to be a great conversation. So Michelle, thank you for joining us here today. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you for having me.
Absolutely. A little bit about Michelle. Michelle is the proud mom of her angel, Sweet Pea, who she lost to miscarriage. Nope. Good night, baby. I love you. Sweet dreams. Oh, that's one of mine. The proud mom to her angel, Sweet Pea, who she lost to miscarriage, her angel daughter, Colette Louise, who she lost at 9 days old, and her only living child, her rainbow baby, Elliot Miguel. Inspired by her journey with Colette, Michelle and her husband founded the Colette Louise Tisdahl Foundation, whose mission is to improve outcomes of pregnancy, childbirth, prematurity, and infancy, as well as aid in the grieving process through financial assistance, education, and advocacy. Their flagship program financially assists families dealing with high risk and complicated pregnancies, NICU stays, and loss. The organization's ability to help families relies on donations and grants, and they are grateful if you're able to donate, and I will share a link in just a moment. Michelle also participates and advocates on issues of maternal health, maternal mortality, infant health and safety, and pregnancy complications. Michelle lives in Glenview, Illinois with her son Elliot and husband Mark and dog Nemo. So what kind of dog do you have?
It's a Pomeranian.
Aw, cute.
Yeah. Yeah, who is very, very funny because he's now older. He's 14 now. And so we're starting to see the slowdown of his age.
Yes.
And when he was a puppy, I lived with my sister, and my sister came over just not all that long ago. And she goes, "That's not the same dog. That dog was so rambunctious." I was like, "Yes, I know. But, we all slow down a little with age." So
that is true. Yeah. We had a Weimaraner who lived to be 14, and it's a very long life for a Weimaraner. They have the typical expectations 9 to 12 years. And he went from being he loved to play fetch. So he would play fetch. I would throw the ball 100 times and he would bring it back every time. And they're kind of in the last year of his life. It was I would throw it 3 times. And on the 3rd time, he would bring it back close enough that he knew he had done his job of bringing it back, but it was far enough away that he was like, she's not going to come get this and throw it again.
Right. Very nice.
Oh, but he was a great dog, really sweet. And we have 3 dogs now, so but yeah. So that was I mean, a lot. It sounds like you're pretty busy with the foundation, your advocacy work. What do you enjoy doing when you're not busy with your family or any of that work?
Yeah. So I like to read. I will say that I have not been a very good reader as of late. Just I go through phases where that sometimes happens. I love to watch TV. My husband and I have been binging Billions, and so we're now on the current season. We're a couple episodes behind of where the new episodes. So I love to kind of do that and to really delve into show and different shows. And then I knit when I have time, and I don't have a little one who's trying to pull at my knitting, and just really like to hang out with friends and family, and really just kind of relax and have times to decompress and to talk about life and the world and all of those kinds of things.
Yeah. I've been a little bit avoiding talking about life in the world since this weekend, but it is nice to have people that you can talk about everything with. So that's great.
Right. Yeah, for sure.
I'm in a little bit of a reading slump right now myself, because normally I read just like candy.
Right.
But I'm reading one book right now that's called The Five, it's about the lives of the women who were murdered by Jack the Ripper. And it's so dense.
Well, I saw this one. This looked very interesting. But I'm kind of giving myself a rule. I'm not going to buy any new books until I start reading some of the ones I have.
Hey, that's a good rule. I don't have that rule for myself, and I should.
New rule. We'll see how long that lasts.
Yeah, that's a good rule. But this one is so dense. It's taken me. I think I'm like 25, maybe a quarter of the way through it. And it's just so densely packed. It is hard to get through. You get through 5 pages and you're like, that was so much information. I have to stop for a minute.
I've definitely read those books where yeah.
But I'll decompress after I finish this one with something much lighter.
Right. Yeah, that's usually what I tend to do is I do a heavy book and then I'll do a really light one and then kind of go back and forth.
Yeah.
So
what's your favorite thing that you have knit?
My favorite thing I've knit, so I knit this, and it was kind of a massive project. It's called a papillon. So it's a shawl, but it looks like a butterfly.
Yeah.
It was with techniques that I had never done, and it seemed daunting, and it was really fun to do, and I really enjoyed doing it, and was part of a knit along group that did it with my mom and some others, and so I think when I look at it and I see it, it's also very reminds me very much of just meeting with a group of women who really had very disparate experiences in life and everything, and just learning and fellowship with them, and so I think that's my favorite one.
Oh, that's really cool. I have a lot of not a lot. I have one Afghan that one of my relatives knitted when I was very young. And she's since passed away. She was old. I don't know if she just passed away from old age or if something happened. I don't remember. It was too long ago. But it's one of my favorite blankets because of that. And it's unfortunate that it's such a small blanket. But
right, of course.
But it's great. She. I wonder. Now I don't remember if she actually knitted or if she crocheted. I don't remember. Okay. So it may have been crocheted. I don't know.
Yeah, absolutely. But those are kind of like the best blankets. Are those that have that homemade touch and all of that.
Yeah, so, just something where you look at it and you're like, oh, this reminds me of so and so. I have a box of baby blankets that still, even after, like, it was my baby blanket, it was my kids' baby blankets, but still, when you open that bin of blankets, it smells like my mama's house.
Right. Totally got that. I totally feel that. And those are like the just precious things that you have.
Yeah. It just kind of brings up those memories and everything.
Yep.
Do you have a serial killer or true crime story that fascinates you?
Yeah. So I will say, I mean, I swear you could get me hooked into just about anything in that realm. If I have the time, I'll just like get obsessed with it. But the one that I think that really stands out to me that I kind of am obsessed about is the Andrew Cunanan kind of murder spree. So he killed, amongst others, Johnny Versace, and sort of did this, cross country killing spree. And I live in Chicago, and so he killed Lee Miglin here in Chicago, and then in Miami killed Johnny Versace. And we used to spend time every summer. We had a lot of family in Miami, and we would go down, and we had seen Johnny Versace's mansion. It wasn't unheard of because we usually stay in Miami Beach. It wasn't unheard of to just see him out and about. And so I think that was very, I remember all of that very vividly, and it's something that's been very, just very interesting to follow. And Darren Criss did an amazing job in the true crime story version of the story. Just really kind of utterly impressed me with how well he handled playing that character and, doing that. So yeah, that would probably be one that I would say is definitely at the top, if not the top one.
Yeah, that's really cool. Yeah. Sorry, was that a fire alarm going off at your house?
Nope.
Okay.
Might be my son screaming because we're doing, bedtime is not, we're in a big boy bed, and now he has freedom to roam. And so, yeah.
Yeah. Okay. I just wanted to make sure because I thought I heard something. Hopefully it's not at my house. I don't hear anything here, so we should be good. Just wanted to make sure. Right. Safety first.
Absolutely.
Well, that's cool. So is there a specific documentary that you liked about that one?
Not a documentary, but it was Ryan Murphy did, and it was True Crime Story. I think it was the series. It had just a couple of them, but gotcha. He did one of them, and that was just really, I thought that was a really great look at it, and just to see the whole thing. So
yeah, that's cool. I'll have to check that out.
Yeah.
So switching to the topic at hand, again, for those who are here in chat or just joining, we are going to be talking about parenting after loss. So if you have any questions related to that, feel free to pop them in and we'll address them. But Michelle, can you share some of your emotional highs and lows that you've experienced on your own parenting journey, kind of to lay the foundation here for our...
Yeah, I mean, so, I think a really big, low that was, filled with small wins was just getting to the point of bringing a child home. Mm-hmm. And so, we struggled with infertility with no known cause. So getting the diagnosis and not knowing exactly why is just really frustrating and exhausting. And I think, I can't speak to how men would feel in this situation, but I think for a lot of women, it just feels like the societal messaging is, you can have babies, and mm-hmm. that should just be a natural thing. And so when you can't, it's a lot of just not even, just feeling of failure as a parent, but failure as a woman. And, I think that's really, that was really hard. Along the way, we finally went to IVF, and I got pregnant in my first round of IVF, and then miscarried. And so I think the high was finding out I was in fact pregnant and just being really thrilled with that. And then the huge low of them losing that pregnancy. Mm-hmm. And then having once I had done IVF, and, they kind of warn you, your first round of IVF may not take. And that's usually just because they're kind of going on some things that they don't know exactly how your body is going to react to medications and things like that. And so to get pregnant on our first round sort of felt like, okay, now my body knows how to do this. And so when we did a second round, it sort of just felt like, of course it's going to work this time. Mm-hmm. And it didn't. And I think that's, even more devastating, not just the loss, but the devastation. And then, on our third round, we got pregnant with my daughter Colette, and, we're just completely thrilled. Went through it. It was tough pregnancy for me in terms of just being sick all the time. But, still did it, and, really we're excited about it. Got past that kind of scary first trimester, felt like things were good. And then when I was 21 weeks pregnant, I was hospitalized with preeclampsia, and then stayed in the hospital for a little over 3 weeks before the doctors recommended delivery. And so Colette was born at 24 weeks and 5 days, which is really scary and all of that. And they prepare you for all these things of, things. And they said, you won't hear her cry. You won't hear her do anything. And that doesn't mean that she's, not alive, but just how tiny she was. And, I remember when they pulled her out and they said it's a girl and everything, and they whisked her off, all of a sudden the room got quiet again while they're, starting to stitch me up. And there was this little tiny squeak. And I said, is that her? And they said, yeah. And I thought, well, okay, so see, I'm going to prove you all wrong. This badass daughter of mine is going to just prove you all wrong. They had warned us if they couldn't fit the smallest tube in,
Right.
then they couldn't intubate. And then we were basically just going to hold her while she died. And the second to smallest fit her. And so it was just like those kinds of things were happening. NICU is just anybody who has ever been ever had a child in NICU or known somebody who had a child in NICU, it really is a roller coaster. And my younger sister was a preemie. She was born 8 weeks early. And I remember the best thing that I think anybody told me at that point was my mom, who said, it is a roller coaster and you just have to hang on. You will start a day feeling like everything that is going to hell, and you might end the day feeling like everything's going great, or vice versa. And you might do this up and down a couple times every day. And that was really what it was. After 9 days, her lungs were just too damaged by the high power ventilator she had been on. And they had never been able to transition, although they tried several times, they had never been able to transition her down. And so, we were warned, definitely in denial of anything that was going to happen. And I remember sitting with my husband, at the incubator, and I could feel the doctor about to turn to us and tell us, that it was time to start making decisions. And all I remember is, I think I only said this in my head. I may have screamed it out loud. I don't know. But I said, please, Colette, don't make me make this decision. And almost instantaneously of me, saying, screaming this, whatever it was, her numbers started to drop on their own.
Oh, wow.
And so that was always something that I really hold as a very big gift that my daughter gave to me, of saying I didn't have to make that call. And, that was difficult. And so the first time I got to hold my daughter was as she was dying. And, that's about as low as parenting can get, right?
Yeah.
And, something that no parent should ever have to experience. That's against our natural order of things and circle of life. And then, kind of surviving day to day after that is really hard. And I mean, it's been a little over 5 years now. We're at like 5.5 since we lost her. And it's still, there are days that are difficult and there are moments that are difficult. And then, I would say it may not seem exactly like parenting, but starting the foundation and it really taking off was a really big, high for me as a parent. And then we ultimately decided after I had to come to terms with, we tried again IVF. That didn't take after Colette had died. And I finally had to come to terms with it myself, and I carried it around by myself for a while, of how terrified I was to be pregnant again. And so, finally admitted to my husband how, terrified I was. And so we went through surrogacy. And so we had a gestational carrier who carried our son, who is now 3. And it was about 21, 22 weeks of that pregnancy when COVID struck. And so it changed everything and anything. And then, a high is the day he was born, but I mean, is really every day since. I mean, I think having gone through so much, it's just like, I really, I appreciate so much of just him being a kid. And I feel like I am a way different parent than I would have been. Obviously I don't know for sure, but I think I'm a way different parent of just being, more willing to be in the, the ick and the mud of, being a parent and being a boy mom. And, knowing that messes can be cleaned up and, all of that kind of stuff, and really just having fun being hands-on with him, is really lovely. And I'm, grateful for it every day. And, I think grateful for just how he is. I mean, he's a really good kid. He's a really loving kid. I think he has the energy of all of his siblings and his own energy, because wow, that kid doesn't stop. But, I think it's just been really amazing to do it. But parenting after loss is not easy. And there are days and there are moments that are really triggering and really difficult. And yeah, it's not for, not everybody can do it. I think those of us who bear it, do it, and it's very tough. But yeah.
Yeah. Well, I appreciate you sharing your story. I know that you said it's only been 5 years, and that has to take just a monumental amount of strength in general to be able to share and articulate a story like that. So thank you from the bottom of my heart for everything that you do, and just for being willing to talk about it and provide support to other people. I think that shows a lot of resilience in you. So thank you.
Oh, thank you.
I know that you talked about kind of that fear after loss, and I know many parents struggle with feelings of guilt or fear after a loss. So how did you navigate those emotions? You said y'all went through surrogacy and everything. So what got you to that point where you're like, I can't do this? And then what advice do you have for parents who may be facing something similar?
Yeah. So, I mean, I can tell you about mine. I think what was very difficult was there's no answer as to why I developed preeclampsia.
Yeah.
There's just none. And it's really frustrating. And so I feel like Colette died May 31st of 2018. And I feel like I spent, that summer basically going to every single doctor I could imagine, because I wanted to find out what was wrong with me, because I was convinced something was wrong with me. And if I could just fix that, this would never happen again. And the problem was nothing was wrong with me, right? Like, yeah, sure. There's little things. Yes. Could I lose some weight here? Sure, maybe. But, can I do this? But it was nothing that was definitive to do anything, and nothing that was like, big enough to cause all these sorts of problems. And, it was really hard to navigate that and to deal with that when there's no answer, right? And I think that was something that was really difficult. And I remember, I read, actually my husband and I were just joking about this today, is we met with a maternal fetal medicine doctor and kind of went through and did stuff. And, one of the things he said to me is like, well, we'll have you take baby aspirin because there's a study that's proven that doing this. And I had read the study and I said, yeah, but the author of the study even says he doesn't even know if it really was the baby aspirin that was so successful, or if it was just kind of chance and luck that maybe these pregnancies would have never had it, regardless of baby aspirin or not. And, I think that was really hard. And shortly after that visit, because one of the things I asked him to do, and he said he would do, is to order blood work to see if I had a blood clotting disorder. And it came back with nothing. And I remember talking to my sister and saying, yeah, great. Now I don't have that either. And she said, okay, can you stop for a minute and listen to yourself? You're actually hoping for a blood clotting disorder.
Right.
You understand that's not a good thing. And that really just stayed with me and resonated with me. We did try naturally for a little while and we're not successful. And then we did do one round of IVF. And what I found out when the day we found out, and I pretty much knew I was not pregnant. I think I allowed myself to fall into some of the hope, but I pretty much knew that. And when we found out, and my husband was home from work and we finally had the time to sit there, he was crying and I wasn't. And then I had to recognize that I really felt relieved that I wasn't. And that was a really heavy, thing to carry, to say, there's no reason to say that I couldn't get pregnant and have a normal pregnancy, but I don't know that I can. And so I'm really fearful. And so I really hung on to that, completely on my own for a little while. And then we, at the time, were attending a monthly in-person support meeting. And during that meeting, two of the moms who were there, one announced or said she was going to use an egg donor, that had been a recommendation from a doctor, and she was going to do it that way. And another one who had difficulties was going to start the adoption process. And, as they were telling us this, I kept saying, like, that's so great and how brave of them to recognize something wasn't working right for them for, some medical reasons, some just emotional health reasons, some, all of that. It wasn't working well enough for them. And so they pivoted, and like, that's so amazing. And then I sort of felt that inner dialogue that said, okay, so if you can say that about them, why are you not giving yourself the same courtesy and the same grace? And so it was driving home from that meeting that I turned to my husband and said, I don't think I'm ready to be pregnant, and I don't know when I will be, and I would like to pursue surrogacy. And, I think that was really the coming to terms with. And, I think it's something that in all aspects, right? We can talk to our friends and to our loved ones very nicely and give them the support and the grace, and then we don't do it to ourselves. And I think, it was just that one moment where my inner voice said, like, yeah, could you like just maybe give yourself that same,
right,
grace and courtesy and everything. So I think it's really, in terms of suggestions to other parents, I think it's, for me, and I remember my OB/GYN telling me the same thing, is she's like, physically, there's nothing to say you couldn't, but you need to be emotionally prepared for what this means.
Right.
And if you're not, then no, this isn't a good idea. And I think that that's really something to be important. I also think the power of support. I think once you have lost, it has changed your perspective on life in so many different ways, and will continue to do so. And I think finding those support systems with other parents who have experienced loss, having that is really important. I have a chat going, that kind of goes on and off, and we sometimes are talking all the time, and sometimes it goes a little while, but it's 3 other lost moms and myself. And, it's everything. We're all parenting, children after loss. And, it's sometimes just everything from just the mom questions of, hey, what high chair did you guys use? Or, whatever, to, I had a really big fear, I had a really big panic today over this, because I think one of the things that's really different in parenting after loss is the fear factor of losing your living children is so heightened. And to a lot of people, if you shared with them and told them the story, they would look at you and think, oh my God, you're an overreactor or whatever. And I think just to be able to reach out to a group of people and say, I had this experience today and this is how I felt. And for them to sort of, just feedback of like, yeah, I've been there, or I get it. If I was in your situation, I'd probably be the same way. Just really makes a difference. And I think that's really important too.
Yeah. I mean, community is one of those things that if you can find it, and you can find people who are like-minded or have been through similar things, we talk about that all the time, just having people who understand a little bit. And, it can be really helpful for whatever you're going through, not just parenting after loss, but if you have anxiety and you can find other people who have anxiety and you can express yourself like you're saying, they get it. They get it. They just get it without having to explain even further. So that's really good.
Yeah.
Parenting after loss, I'm sure, involves discussing some difficult topics with your living child also. So, that could include the existence of angel siblings or what you went through as far as surrogacy or those kinds of things. How do you approach those conversations, and what advice do you have for parents who are facing these sensitive subjects and having to address them?
Yeah. So in terms of advice, I would definitely say, I think we need to be more open about loss. And I think, it's something, I got a lot of criticism for how openly I talked about Colette in the beginning. And I didn't let it deter me. I just was like, this is my child, it's my daughter, and this is how I'm going to do it. And that's it. I had people who said, well, you're not going to tell, when we were expecting our son, you're not going to tell him anything about it. We regularly talk about Colette. We regularly talk about Sweet Pea. Those are his siblings, and I think it's really important to have that as part of it. And kids know some stuff. I mean, I think we don't give kids nearly enough credit for everything that they kind of just pick up on.
Yeah.
And so I will say, when it comes to Colette, we have a bear that represents her, and we use it in our family photos and things like that. And from his early newborn photos that were taken in our backyard when he was maybe 2 weeks old to now, if the Cocoa Bear is what we call it, is in the picture, he reaches out and holds the hand of Cocoa Bear in every single picture. There's not one that I have with that. We have never once said to do that. We just have noticed he does it. And so on some level, he knows. I believe he has these moments where he sort of, stares off a little bit. And I believe he's talking to Colette. And I will notice that when he is done with that, he will come over, and usually he'll give, me a hug or, something, and I'll do this. I had one situation a while back when he was still eating in a high chair, and I was sitting at the kitchen table. He was in the high chair, and he was staring off in the distance, and he was he started laughing. And I said, "Oh, well, Mom wants to know the joke. Can you and Colette tell me the joke?" And he looked at me, and he looked up where he had been looking, and then he rolled his eyes. And I remember thinking, oh my God, my kids are rolling their eyes at each other over me.
Mm-hmm.
And just what a moment as a parent to be like, oh my God, that's and thinking about my sister and I did that with our parents, right? We still do it occasionally, where it's like, oh, here we go again, or whatever. And so I do believe that it's, really important. I think it's adjusting it with age. So we have some very good children's books that, have explained surrogacy. There's one, my son has loved it, that's The Very Kind Koala, that explains surrogacy. And they explain it in terms of using, somebody else's pouch with koalas and kangaroos.
Really cute.
And so it's really beautiful. And we've also had some things about siblings. There's a book that I really love, and everyone here loves it, that is called my Perfectly Imperfect Family, and talks about a very similar story of I had a sister who was born before me, and she's still part of our lives and all of that. And I think those are the books we're using now. As he gets older, we will update those. We will ask questions and do that. But I think it's really important to be very open and honest, because, I hear stories all the time of, adults who find out when they're adults, they had another child, and they had a sibling. And everyone I've talked to has always said, I just wish I had known. And known because you want that relationship with your sibling, but also known because it gives you a better context of who your parents are.
Yeah.
And, doing that. And I think that's really important. And I think, we're not honest enough with our kids. And they know when things are going on, and they can tell, that there's something going on. And I think it's really important to do so.
Yeah. What was the name of the second book? It was The Very Kind Koala, and what was the second one?
And my Perfectly Imperfect Family, I think, is what it is.
I'm just trying to grab some links for chat so they can find these books on Goodreads if they want to. I don't see that one. I'll have to find it a little later, but that's okay. So, I mean, I feel like people don't give kids enough credit for what they can understand and what they can take in and process themselves at different ages. Of course, there's age-appropriate conversations, and there's ways to have age-appropriate conversations and those kinds of things. And I am a strong advocate for being truthful with my kids. Some people probably feel like I am too truthful with my kids, but if they ask me a question, I'm going to explain. I mean, that's just how I am. But I do think that an age-appropriate conversation can happen at any age. You don't have to wait for a certain time to talk to them about something like that. So,
and I think I don't think of formal conversations. I just think of we talk about it regularly.
Yeah.
He's not really, he's 3. He's not really asking questions as of yet. I know questions will come.
Yeah.
And, we will handle those as they come along. And I think, as parents, right, I understand it's very scary, right? You want to address all the concerns. You don't want to get them so fearful. You don't want to do this. But I think being really open and honest and having that communication open and honest allows for kids to really understand what's going on and to shape it, and then to feel like they can continue to ask questions.
Yeah.
So I imagine when the questions do come, it's not like they're going to come only one time. They're going to come again and again as he gets older, as he learns more, as he understands more of what this means. And I want him to know that stuff. I think it's really important to do it. So, yeah.
Well, and especially, with it coming so quickly also on the heels of your loss. And now you have this wonderful blessing as well. And it's like, I feel like the grieving process has to play a part in that also, because you can't just poof your grief away. I mean, you can put up a wall and not let anyone in to see it, but that's not a realistic portrayal of grief and what you're going through as a parent either.
Right.
So,
yeah. And I think it's something, so we like the term that not all lost parents do of rainbow baby. And so we very much consider Elliot to be our rainbow baby. But, there's this common misconception that once you have another baby, like that cures the grief, or that ends the grief. And I think something that I thought I was prepared for, and I really wasn't, was how triggering it is to bring a kid home after loss. And just because, and it's everything from, all the fears that, you have with a newborn of, oh my God, am I going to, hurt them? Am I going to do this? All that. You have that, but it's magnified because you actually know what the worst case scenario is, and you've lived it. To, the fact of, just people who say things like, how's it being a first-time parent? And you want to scream, I'm not a first-time parent, things like that. One thing that I always hate, and it is very triggering for me, is when people say, said before we had Elliot, well, you better get your sleep now because what'll happen. And saying the best night of sleep my husband and I ever had was the first night Elliot was home. Because there was not the silence in the same way that it had been, for years. There was a reminder. We had some relief in the fact of, okay, we were able to bring a child home. And so, I think it's all of that combined that is really triggering, and magnifies the loss, right? My vision of parenthood had always been 2 girls, and that's probably because that's what I grew up with, but also my sister is my best friend, and, we talk, multiple times a day and all of that. And so I think I saw that. And so when Colette was born, it felt like, okay, I'm halfway there. And then, to have a boy, and don't get me wrong, I love being a boy mom in ways that I never imagined and all of that. But it also is a grief that I carry with me, is that I will never parent a girl in the way I thought I would parent a girl.
Yeah.
And that's, it's hard. And there are just triggers of that all along, So, I think, trying to kind of live in that space is really, it's tough, and it's heavy, and, something that I think we tend to think of grief as has a finite, end date, right? So you're supposed to grieve for this long, and then you're done, and then you move on. And that's not the way it is. And it's not the way it should be. And so I think that's a really tough, place to be in.
Yeah. Now, you said that some people don't like the term rainbow baby. Is there a reason some people don't like that term?
Yeah, so the reason why the story behind the rainbow baby is it's after the storm, there is a rainbow. Right. And so they started saying the loss is a storm. Some people say that they don't want to act like that was a storm and make their child's life sound like a negative. They don't love the term. So I use it. I love it.
It's personal choice,
common,
right?
Common wording for it. But I do always like to say, because I have met, parents who just really just don't feel like that provides them that, same joy and same relief. And that's totally, preference. And I think, it's one of those things that language matters, words matter. And, so I do, try to say that I love the term. But not everyone does.
Yeah. And you don't have to use it. If you don't like it, you don't have to use it. That's fine. I mentioned resilience earlier and how much I admire the resilience that it must take for you to just exist. And I'm sure that is a key component of parenting after loss. Can you talk about some strategies or practices that have helped you or other parents that you've worked with in that regard?
Yeah. So, it's always very interesting because I feel like I always get a lot of the, I can't imagine, how did you survive this? All of that kind of thing. And I think, you survive because there's no other choice. Right. And so you figure out a way to do this. And I think of, if we're just going to say parents, like, parents who have kids who have, high special needs, parents whose kids, just don't fit in, any of that. Like, how do you do that? Like, it seems impossible when you're not doing it, but it's just something you do, and you just sort of figure out strategies. But I think, some of the things that help is I think, again, sort of like we talked about, the sense of community, of having people that you can call on. I think really establishing, we've gotten away from sort of that proverb of like, it takes a village to raise a child.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it is really about finding your village, and it looks different for every family. And, but having those people that can support you and hold you and remind you that you're doing a great job, because, most of parenting is guessing and,
That's true.
hoping for the best. Right. And, my sister just, gave birth, at the end of September, and her son was early and is in the NICU right now. And, she said something like, I don't know if I'm doing this right. And I said, you never will know if you're doing it right, but you just do it. And like, you have to lead from that. So I think that, that's a really powerful thing, is just to sort of like realize, like, you are going to do it. And, we're all human. We're going to screw up our kids in some sort of way. Right. And like, we're going to make mistakes, and we're going to, and, I think it's the rectifying the relationship after, things are done. And I think it's really, giving yourself grace and yourself strength. I think, a lot of times we tend to think like you have to be 100% yourself and on your game and everything. And it's like, yeah, if you are having a day and you can only give 50%, if you give that 50%, like that was the best you could do that day. And that's okay. But, I think it's just what all parents need to do, right? We all need to sort of support each other and find those people who are going to support us, and try to stay away from the people who aren't, or who are going to do damage. And just really, give ourselves, some grace and some leeway on what we're doing, that we're all human and we're all going to do our best. I am a big proponent of therapy and of support groups, and, finding your community and doing all of that, because it's hard. Right. And I think it's just, some days it is literally putting one foot in front of the other is the hardest thing. Right. And that is all you can do. And some other days you can be rock star, mom, dad, and that's okay. Like, those are all good. So I think that's really what I would say, is just really giving yourself the support, giving your family the support, taking up people on offers of help. And I will say I am just learning that very much right now. I think because we had a child born in COVID and who wasn't vaccinated for a while, we really were full-time, complete parents. Like, we didn't have any, daycare. We had very limited interactions with people and certain family members and all of that. And so I'm now at, age 3, when we're kind of beyond that. He's been vaccinated and all of that, where I don't really know how to ask for help or to receive help in that way. And I'm just starting to do it. And so today, in fact, my son usually goes to school on Mondays. Today was a day off. And, he went to my parents for a couple hours, and my husband and I went and saw a movie. I mean, it was great.
That's great. Yeah.
It was fantastic. And that was something that, for a long time, I felt like it made me a bad mom if I was doing things like that. And here's the thing, my son had a blast at his grandparents' house, right? And like, he enjoyed it. He had fun. He did this. My parents loved it. All of it. And so I think also just allowing for those times and I will tell you, I am not one that's good at asking for help or, taking people up on it. And I'm really trying to learn that because I think, having that time today has made me a better mom for tomorrow. And, that's something that's important too.
Yeah.
I don't know if I totally answered your question, by the way.
No, I think you did. So, I mean, I feel like the it takes a village thing is something that I am also having to relearn because I got divorced. And so I'm a single mom. I moved down to be closer to my family, partially to be close to my grandma who has dementia. And so she needs somebody to go over there every day. But then also partially so that, I don't know if she's here yet. I don't see her on the couch out there, but my sister's coming to stay with my kids this week because I'm going out of town. And so it's things like I can call my dad to say, hey, 16-year-old has a project that he's working on for school. Can you help him with it? And of course, like before you can even get the question out of your mouth, they say yes. Right? They're like, yeah, I'm here. What do you want? And then your kid, you're right. They have such a good time interacting with family members, interacting with neighbors or whatever. It's amazing. And that's something that I didn't have when I was married. I was very isolated, and that's a whole other conversation. But now that I'm a single parent, I really do have to ask for help a lot more. And it's been so nice.
Right. Yeah. And I think it's one of those things like, I've said this, right? Like, you're talking about the kind of like what I started answering the question with was like, we sort of put these things that like, I can't imagine, right? Like I'll sit there and I'll think like, I can't imagine being a single parent. And yet I know so many single parents who are doing this amazing thing, right? And half the time you don't even know how you're doing it, right? Like if you stopped and thought about how you're doing it, you'd probably like kind of fall apart.
No, you can't think about it.
But you do it, right? Yep. You figure out a way and you figure out and you act very much from like, this is the world I'm in and I'm going to do it as best as I can. Yeah. And, it looks different for us every day, right? There's going to be days that it's just, you're going to throw on the TV and just sort of, let your kids do this. And there's going to be days where you are just amazing and, rocking it. And then you're gonna have everything in between. And I think, really it's just, not putting ourselves up to such a standard that's a standard that's not human. I mean, we're going to have bad days. We're not going to feel well certain days.
Yes.
Right? Like all of that. And I think that that's really key and really important to do.
Yeah. Well, I tell my 16-year-old all the time also, like I make mistakes. I make plenty of mistakes. Ask either of my kids. I make plenty of mistakes. I tell my 16-year-old, it's okay. When you write a book later in your life and you're like, here's all the things I've been through in my life, just include everything I screwed up on. It's just fodder for your novel. It's okay.
Right, exactly. Yeah. We'll often joke with things. I'll be like, well, we'll just pay for his therapy. It's fine.
Yeah, exactly.
Whatever. It's fine. That kind of thing.
Yes.
So,
yep. Absolutely. Well, and you keep talking about grace. And that's one of the things that I say a lot is that you have to give yourself the grace and the space to make mistakes and to fix them if you can, or to apologize for them if you can't. And just kind of owning up to it is. And
I think we need to do the same thing with our kids, right? We need to give them the grace and the space for everything, is to say, and I harken that back to your, thing about what you give advice for is, I think we need to give kids credit, and I think we need to give them grace to take things and to handle things and space to really work on those, like processing those, and how does that look and all of it too.
Sorry, my sister is here and she's just staring into the she had her hands like this on my door. But yeah, I mean, kids deserve a lot of credit for also being resilient and being able to live through all of the mistakes that parents make, because there's not a perfect parent. There just isn't.
Right.
Now, you've talked about connection and kind of finding that solace in connecting with others who've experienced similar issues. And I know that to be true from my own experiences as well. But what role has community and peer support played in the lives of the parents that you have been involved with as well?
Yeah, I think, one of the things that was really important to me when we established this is, I was finding when I looked around at other organizations that were doing this, there are organizations. So for example, for a NICU family that are doing amazing things, right?
Mm-hmm.
They'll host weekly dinners so that NICU parents can, take a break, can actually eat a meal,
Yeah.
can communicate with other parents and have that support. And one of the things I said was, okay, well, that's really great, but what if a family can't afford to get to the NICU for those kinds of things? What if a family is working during that point? What are you doing? And that was something that was very important to me. So, those are some things that we've done, is like providing that financial support so that a family can go to the NICU and can have that sense of community, can have that connection to their child, but also to doctors and nurses that are, doing really great work, and to other parents who are, in similar situations, right? And could run the gamut. And I think that that's really something that's really important, is to have those senses of community, to have that, really just, I think largely, and I will say, I know I felt this way, is I really felt like I was the only person that this had ever happened to in the world. Right. And I knew that it wasn't. We actually had very good family friends. I was a flower girl in their wedding that had twins and lost one to stillbirth. And I was like 17, 18 when that happened. So I remember that very vividly. And they were, they were, and they still are, very supportive of that. But it still felt very lonely and very isolating to be in that case. And I think, the community comes with sharing our stories and with telling people very openly that you are not the only person to have lived through this. And you will not be the only person who will live through this in the future. And I think that's really, really important. I can tell you, so you had mentioned your grandmother had dementia. And so my grandmother also had dementia in her final years. And so in, probably May, June of 2020, she was starting with the dementia. It was getting really full blown. And my mom, who was her caregiver, called my sister and I, sort of just venting on the phone about how difficult it was, and how there was just things she was doing, and she was falling more often, and all of that, and just kind of having that decompressing kind of thing. And one of the stories she really started with was, she said, yeah, and then she woke me up last night screaming, and I went down, into her room, and she was screaming, "Bring me my baby! Why won't anyone let me see my baby? Bring me my baby!" She goes, and I don't know what that was about. And as my mom started to explain the story, I finally, when she kind of got to a pause, I said, "Did she ever have a loss?" And my mom said, "You know what? Now that you say that," she goes, "my grandmother told me once, sort of in passing, about that she had a loss."
Wow.
She said, "Hold on." And so as we did research, we found out that she had in fact had a loss. And at the time, they would not even bring, you wouldn't even see the baby. She had a stillbirth and they wouldn't even see the baby, and they're doing this. And she very much wanted to see her child. And so she was, screaming this and reliving it. And, this was somebody who had never mentioned this ever. And, that we turned out when we talked to family members and things that, basically within a couple of weeks, her parents told her, "Okay, now you don't talk about this anymore. You just move on and you parent your children. We're living." And so she didn't. And, I just remember thinking, and obviously she was not capable of explaining it herself, but just thinking how much less isolation I would have had I known that something had happened to my grandmother. Would it have changed the course of anything that happened? Probably not. But would it have helped to have known that? Yeah, it would have. Would it have helped to know that in the immediacy of everything that happened, that I could have just had somebody within my own family, my grandmother, who I was very close with, who could have just said, "Yeah, it feels heavy. It feels, really bad," and just to commiserate with, right? And then, to really live through seeing as my mom is struggling with this, right? My mom is in her 60s and has found out that she had another sibling, that, and she has two brothers, that she had a sister, right? And how she's doing that. And I think it's, solidified for me the talking to my son about this is I can see the effects and the damage within my own family it has because this wasn't talked about. And, you know, and she says, I now feel like knowing this, I understand a lot of the things my mother did so much better. And, you know, and sort of sitting there and saying like, that relationship could have been so much stronger if that had been talked about at all. If you had understood what your mom was doing as a mom, as a lost mom, and you didn't know this until she was mentally not even really there.
Right.
And, you know, I think that that's really hard. So, yeah, I think, you know, in doing that, those are those connections that we need to make and that we need to know. And I think we don't know enough about any of these things. And are there genetic components to things? You know, would they have handled my case differently if they had known that there had been loss in the family? I don't know. I don't think they would have, but I don't know. You know, and I think those are also important things just to know and to do.
Yeah.
So.
There's a great book that probably isn't for everyone, but it's a very good book. It's called Damnation Spring. And if you can handle some rough and tumble, cussing up a storm, loggers, and also a lot of loss when it comes to pregnancy and miscarriages and those kinds of things in the kind of family aspect of it. It's a great book, and it talks about a family where the mother has had a loss, and they talk to also their son, who is an older son, talk about how he knew that he had a sister who was born and then died, and that they visit the grave all the time. They leave these little stones on the grave to say, hey, I was here and just honoring you with this gift. And he brings the stones, and it's this little kid. But a great book. It's called Damnation Spring. Wonderful, wonderful. It's a longer one, and it goes into a lot of weird detail about logging that I was like, why are you telling me this? But it's interesting. So, but yeah, I mean, you were talking about a family who, you know, who shares that kind of stuff and how it brings them closer together and helps them understand. And some of the things that those families did go through really kind of underscored the benefits of talking about a loss with someone who is, you know, younger, a little kid, and that they understand and that they can kind of react. And I'm sure they grieve, maybe not as much. I'm sure that they don't understand as much, but yeah, like if your mom had known the whole time, maybe some things would have made a little better sense. Absolutely.
Right. Absolutely. Yeah, for sure. Yeah.
Hey, Bite Mark. So Bite Mark has a question in the question queue. She would like to know, what is your favorite poem?
My favorite poem. I would probably say anything by Maya Angelou. I like the, I believe it's called "And Still I Rise." Yes, I think that's what the name is. And I think that's just, it's really powerful. I think literally anything that she's ever written, I think is just amazing. And she's somebody who, you know, was very honest and real about, you know, if you haven't, you know, read anything or just read about her story, I mean, she's been through a lot and she's done a lot in her life, and, you know, and to have some very honest and real answers, and, you know, I think it's really powerful.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's a good one. I don't remember if we've had anyone who's mentioned that specific one, but you're right. All of the work by Maya Angelou is fantastic. Yes. Another excellent answer for sure. Hey, Frost, welcome. We were talking about parenting after loss. For those of you who are just joining or who have joined midway through, feel free to pop any questions that you might have in the chat, and we're going to continue our journey here. So we've talked a little bit kind of around this question already, but for listeners who may have had friends or loved ones who have experienced pregnancy or infant loss, what are some meaningful ways that they can offer support and understanding?
Yeah. So my first one I always say to this is show up, right? Show up, be there, do not hide from it. You know, do not assume that you're going to get in the way. Show up. I think that's the first thing. I think the second thing is to realize you don't have any answers. Nothing you say or do is going to bring the child back.
Yeah.
And accept that and know that.
Yeah.
And then sit with them in it, whatever they need, right? And, it's different for everybody and it's different at different times. So if they need to, sit and watch a really dumb movie to get their mind off of something, do it with them. If they need to sit and cry, do it with them. If they just need to sit in silence, do it with them. Really follow their lead. I always say Michelle's golden rule is avoid anything that uses the terms just or at least, because, there's a lot of things that, and if you got a group of lost parents together to start talking about all the things that they hated that they heard, a lot of them would start with those kinds of things. So, well, you can always have another. Like, don't say that. You wouldn't say that. And I often say, think of if you're going to somebody who's lost a parent, you're not saying to them, oh, at least you can have another parent. You're not saying that, right? So don't say it about a child, because that's not, kind of think that way. At least they were young, all of that. Don't do it. And so that's sort of my golden rule. And then be very humble with what you know. It is totally okay to say, I really wish there was something I could say, or I don't know what to say. And I'm here. Those kinds of things are really important. I think also trying to show up with specific things. I think, right, we all kind of know how to say is there anything I can do? Or please let me know if there's anything I can do. And when somebody's in that kind of crisis, they don't know how to even articulate what they need next. And so I think, really showing up intentionally and saying, I would like to bring you dinner. Is tomorrow night a good night for me to bring you dinner? I'm going to the grocery store. Do you need groceries? All of those things I think are really helpful. And then I think continue showing up. I think we know how to show up for the immediacy. I think we've learned that. But what happens when a year goes by, when 2 years go by? As years go by, as time goes by, less and less people mention Colette. And I feel like I have a very good support system that does. But less and less people mention her. And so that's really tough. And, so show up on those days, send a card, send a message, do things on birthdays, on anniversaries, on Mother's Day, on Father's Day, all of those kinds of things, because those are really important moments. And particularly for parents who don't have another child yet or never will have another child, and they kind of runs everything. Those Mother's Days and Father's Days are heavy. And when you can get some people who just, a quick text message of, I'm thinking of you and I hope you have a, peaceful Mother's Day or happy Mother's Day, whatever it is, really go really far, because they are parents and you may not be able to see their children, but they are parents. So I think that's also something that's really important. And it's really easy to do these days, make note of a birthday and put it into your calendar and set it as a reminder, schedule the text, schedule the email, whatever you need to do. But I think those are all really important. And then I will also say, because we had this experience, we had friends who did not reach out in the immediacy, and probably about 6 months later, sent us a very heartfelt, honest email and said, I fucked up. Sorry. I don't know. Can I say that?
Oh yeah. No, that's fine. It's totally fine.
But I didn't know what to say at first, and I was trying to figure out what to say, and then time went by, and then I didn't know if I should say anything. And he's like, and now I'm sitting here and I feel like I need to say and follow my sword of I screwed up and I was not there for you guys when you needed it. And I am here now. And in doing that, in that vulnerability, I consider him now, for me, it was more my husband's friend and less my friend. And now I consider him one of my good friends, because he really just was honest, was real. And so if it's been a while, reach out and just say that. I mean, let's be honest, let's be real and say, I was not there in the way that I should have been. And I think that goes a long time. And I can't say that it's going to be how my experience was, where it really made a huge difference. It may not change your relationship, but I guarantee that somebody is going to feel better that you acknowledge that and you did that.
Yeah.
because, I think every lost parent I've talked to has lost at least one friend after loss who just can't deal with it.
Mm-hmm.
And that's really hard. So I think when you have those friends that you either think you may have lost or that you feel, okay, maybe they weren't as close of a friend, if those people reach out and do this, you feel a little bit better, a little bit lighter. Like somebody really, thought of me and thought of this. And I appreciate that.
Yeah. Everyone in chat is saying, oh, my delicate ears. I cuss all the time. I try too, and so I'm like, well, I try to like match my guests' energy. So if they're cussing a lot, I'm like, okay, I don't have to worry about it. But if they're not cussing a lot, then I'm like, I'm gonna hold myself back. So you're totally fine. And Bite says sometimes the late arrivers are picking up when others are starting to drop off, and it can be even more impactful, I think. And so I'll share a quick story, because after my grandfather went missing in 2017, about a year went by. And of course, I had been posting very publicly because there were all these searches and everything. And so I would post all the time about, hey, he's still missing. There's a search going on. If you can help, whatever. And so about a year after he went missing, I actually had an ex-boyfriend who I dated in high school, and we were friends on Facebook. And he reached out and said, I am so sorry that I haven't said anything. I haven't commented on anything. I just didn't know what to say, but I want you to know that I'm thinking about you. And I was like, that's really nice. Like first of all, hadn't thought about him in many, many years. But second of all, it was kind of when people were dropping off a little bit of saying, oh, how are you doing? How are things? Because he'd been missing for a year, and it was like, people just kind of stop asking after a while. And so to have someone reach out who I, first of all, didn't expect it from, but second of all, it was just like, okay, people are paying attention and people are there. There are people who care, who are thinking about you. So yeah, if you screw up and you don't reach out right at first, reaching out with even a message of, I'm sorry, I just didn't know what to say, but I'm thinking about you. It was impactful for me, at least. Not the same situation, but still a tough situation.
I think that anything where you've done that, it just goes a long way to make a difference. And it's a small
it really does
thing, right? It probably took him, less than 5 minutes to draft that message to you and to send it, but it made a difference, right? And here you are still talking about it years later of this was an impactful kind of thing of it, like it just feels that. And I think it really gets away from that feeling of isolation or like, oh my God, I have to be the one who talks about my kid who's dead all the time. And, that gets heavy. And so those kinds of things as well, I think is really helpful.
Yeah, for sure. Tyrion heard me say reaching out. So he's reaching out. Yep. That's what he's doing. Also biting me, which is not nice. So I want to
also don't bite your friends.
Yeah. Don't bite your friends. Don't bite your friends. I want to talk about your work with the Colette Louise Tisdahl Foundation. I know that you support families who are dealing with high-risk pregnancies and NICU stays and loss. What are some common challenges that you found that those families face, and how can they find hope and support, and how do you help them find that hope and support?
Yeah. So I think, the biggest thing that we do is that we see that they realize is things were going fine, and then all of a sudden they weren't.
Yeah.
Right. And so there's an image that I can picture in my head, and I've seen of basically like somebody who's on a beach and looks happy, and there's a wave coming up behind them that they can't see, and saying like, this is very much what it feels like. And it does. Right. So I think that that's hard, it's the shock and okay, everything was okay yesterday, and now all of a sudden it's not.
Yeah.
So I think there's that. I think it's also, and this is where I think the financial piece really comes in, is, in these situations, right, it's a time when usually there is a drop in income because of what's going on. So if, somebody is pregnant and needs to go into bed rest, right, there's inevitably going to be some drop in income, right? How much that is, it depends on each employer and each situation. There's a drop in income. And usually there's also there's increased expenses, right? So, for example, in our for our NICU families, we now have, I think the average one-way trip for families is over 50 miles. And so, at a time when typically parents are taking more time off of work or anything like this, and then the expenses of travel are increasing. It's really hard. And I feel like people are kind of forced into these decisions that they're making very difficult decisions, and doing things. So, we will have people who apply who, are supposed to be hospitalized during a high risk pregnancy for safety reasons, and people who will sign themselves out against medical advice because they can't afford to stay in the hospital. They need to work. And so they're putting themselves and, their babies' lives at risk. But I get it, right? You can only do so much.
Yeah.
In NICU, we'll see things where it's like baby's 6 weeks old and in NICU, and they've maybe seen them twice, and that's, you get that. Or they're doing things and they're not really taking care of themselves. So we'll have people who apply who say, I live 3 hours away. There's not, I can't afford to stay. I can't afford to do this. And so they drive and then they sleep in their cars, and things like that. So, things that are just, physically not safe, but also, especially for somebody who's postpartum, but just in general, right? Sleeping in your car is not restful sleep.
Right.
Not being able to see your child is not healthy. All of those things. And then in loss, having to make decisions, like, for example, I personally don't like cremation for myself, and that's just a thing I have. But sometimes we have families who have to make decisions of cremation because it's cheaper, or if they bury their child and get, help with that a child doesn't have a headstone for a long time. And that, just feels even worse, right? All of those kinds of things. People who are hurrying back to work in situations that they can't be in. We just helped a family that, she had a loss, and it's, I think it's like her third loss. And she's a director at a daycare center, and she cannot go back to work. She has tried, and she basically ends up having breakdowns and leaves. And so, and it makes sense, right? I understand that feeling. And so, trying to do all of that. So I think that's one of the biggest challenges is access to really be able to take care of yourself and your family, and not letting money have to dictate all of your decisions. And I think those are two really powerful things. And I think we try to help that with providing them with the financial help so that, rent still gets paid, or they're getting gas cards to take those long trips. Or, to keep electricity on, to get, sometimes medical equipment. If a baby's going home on medical equipment that's not covered by insurance, things like that. All of those kinds of things that, put stops on your ability to parent, to care for yourself, to care for your family, that we are really trying to help with so that people can do what they need to do and not be bogged down with the financial piece.
Yeah. I can't imagine. I mean, with both of my kids, I was fortunate to live pretty close to the hospitals that they were born at. And when my youngest was in the NICU, they actually had like a live-in room that I was able to. It wasn't covered by insurance, but it was, about the price of a hotel, and I was in a good position that I could still do that for the few days that he needed to stay after I needed to stay. But yeah, the U.S. sucks sometimes.
Right. Well, it does. We're not doing nearly enough.
No.
I always say, we actually have laws saying dogs can't be separated from their mothers for 8 weeks, and we have nothing of the same thing. So we are literally treating our dogs better than we are treating our moms. And that's a really heavy place to be in, to say that. And I think a lot of that is reflected in, we have terrible maternal mortality rates.
Yeah.
We have terrible, just mental health issues that have developed, as a result of pregnancy, or just, existing conditions that are made worse by, some of these problems. Of course there are, right? I'm a long-term anxiety sufferer, right? Who had untreated anxiety until I was about 30. And so, I remember panic attacks growing up and as a kid and young adult and all of that. And when I got diagnosed and like things actually started like being taken care of, I am a totally different person than I was before I did that. I know that. And, I now look back and think of, there were weird things that I did. And I didn't realize it at the time. I didn't have the language for it, but those were coping mechanisms for the anxiety. And so, kind of all of that together means like I come out and I look at it and think like, I am a totally different person because I was untreated. And yeah, all of these things have made it worse.
Yeah.
And so how do I cope with that and how do I work on that? And I think those are all really important things, to really spend time and worry about. But yeah. And we need paid family leave. We just need it across the board.
Not just leave. Insurance not just is a scam.
Right. I know. Exactly. Oh, I know.
Yeah. Bite said I'm not going to
segment on that.
Yeah. Bite said I'm not going to start a healthcare rent, but I wish we had better options. I'm the same. Like there's so many things that are just like, this is complete bullshit. How does everyone not see this? And it's those big dollar sign profits that are in the way of everyone seeing it, I think. So
yeah.
Well, speaking of our shitty healthcare system, in your advocacy work on issues related to maternal health and maternal mortality and infant health and safety, what are some key changes or improvements that you do hope to see in healthcare and support systems for parents?
Yeah, I think, I could come up with a whole list, but
yes.
I think really, I think we can get to paid family leave. I think if we really can drop some politics and focus on, this isn't just for new parents. This isn't just for anything. I mean, we're a generation that is, we are in the sandwich generation where we are having to deal with, elderly parents and grandparents while also parenting children. We are doing this. And we're going to be doing even more of it as the years go by. Longevity is increasing and that's awesome, but that carries with it also some, really complex issues, right? So before when, people only lived to a certain age, we weren't doing so much of the double caretaking on both sides. And we're going to just keep doing more of it. And, that's something I think we need to address, not to mention the fact of, all the health things that just can happen to us as individuals, right? And, needing that time and that support and that energy. So I think that is something I would really like to see. And I think if enough people got out of the way and let it happen, I think we would be much better off. And, it pays dividends for businesses too. I mean, that's always like the one, fight back of like, how can businesses afford it? But when people leave the workforce and they have to continually hire more people, that eats into profits. So it is really better for companies to also work with that. So I really do hope we start seeing this. I think we are starting to see some movement on childcare costs because that's another huge issue that we're seeing. I think one thing that I think COVID especially has revealed is the huge disparities in healthcare and treatment. So, largely based on race and on class. And we can see it, we've seen it for years in the maternal mortality space. Black moms are 3 to 4 times more likely than white women to die related to pregnancy. And even when you take out, all of the socioeconomic factors besides race, it still is. So a Black woman with an advanced degree is still more likely to die than a white woman who has only a high school education or less. Those kinds of things. So this is really, it's really disheartening and it's really, horrible. But I also think that, if we're going to sort of say a good comes out of a bad, I do think that COVID really magnified those and really pushed them up into the conversation. So I do hope that we are starting to address some of that implicit bias that is existing and that racism that's existing amongst medical professionals and in institutions. And so I think that that's something else. I think also more transparency. I think insurance companies who are, really looking at they're not like just a piece of paper that you're doing. It's not a hypothetical. These are real families who are struggling with things. and how can we do this better, and how can we help better? And I think we can get there. And then I think, it's one of the reasons why I won't shut up about it. I think sharing our stories and saying what is going on, I think that is like one of the best forms of advocacy that we can do, is to speak up and to share our stories, because there's a lot of power in storytelling. And I think that that's really an important piece that we need to be doing as well.
Yeah. Bite Mark says we need way better medical leave and cost coverage for real. You are not wrong at all.
No, not at all.
And then also, she says, I was fortunate to have enough money when I had my miscarriage, but even so, I was telling my husband when I was being wheeled out the door to the ambulance that he needed to call my job and tell them I wouldn't be in that night because I didn't want to be worrying about getting fired for a no-call, no-show. Yeah, that kind of attitude sucks. And it goes back to those dollar signs. If people would recognize that actually you are going to get a lot more out of people when you take care of them, that they're going to work a little bit better for you, that they're going to appreciate the company that they work for, they're going to have a little bit of loyalty. I was talking about that just recently with somebody. There are people talking about, I'm a millennial, and so people are always saying like, oh, millennials job hop too much. And I'm like, why would we be loyal to a company that isn't going to be loyal to us in any way, shape, or form? Like, what's the point of that? When you can job hop to another company, make a lot more money, and then job hop right back a couple years later and keep that much more money. If there's no incentive to stay, what's the fucking point of it? Like, there's not one. Why would we stay? So yeah, those kinds of attitudes.
I always operated, I had a boss who was very much, her position was very much like, when your personal life goes to hell, I want you to focus on that.
Yes.
And not on work. And I can tell you, not the best boss in a lot of different ways, but that piece she really held true. And it is really important. And, I was not at that job when I had my complications, and I had a boss that was not understanding at all. And that caused more stress that I shouldn't have been under. And then I had no loyalty to that job, and I didn't go back to that job.
Yeah.
And, I think that's really important, is to say, these are the things that really do matter at the long run. Is we're all going to have personal crises, right? And it's going to be everything. And having employers who are just human and supportive, I think, goes so far. And so, the boss that kind of did this, I mean, there was a couple of personal things when I worked for her that happened. And she would tell me, okay, take time off, or, all of that. That was important. And it kept me there longer than I probably needed to be there, just to move up and do things. But that was really powerful. And then I look at another job and I think, like, I have no loyalty to that. So to me, it was pretty easy to say, I'm going to leave this job and not feel the guilt or anything like that.
Right.
Because I didn't have that loyalty. And that's really important too. Yeah.
Well, that's the only reason I've been at the company that I've been with for that long, is because I truly love the people that I work with. I've been fortunate with great bosses. I've been through a lot of shit since I joined that company personally, and they've been there for me. The people that I work with have really been there for me. And were it not for that, I would have jumped ship so many times. But I have had really good bosses. I've had really good peers. I've had really good people that I work with and work for. And that's, for me, that's enough to keep me there. Because I can go do what I do and make a little more money at our competitor, but I don't know that there's going to be that good of a team. I do want to back up for just a minute, Bite, because I really kind of glossed over that. I am sorry for what you went through. And I know you're not going to go through it again because I know you and your situation. But I am sorry for what you went through. That was not something that I wish you had to go through in your little life.
Yes. Thank you. Thank you.
Can you share a story or experience that stands out to you as a testament to the impact of your foundation's work in helping families?
Yeah. So one that really if you asked me this question tomorrow, I'd probably come up with a different story. But one that I think really is impactful is we had a 16-year-old who was pregnant, and she had a baby in NICU, and which is actually pretty common with teenage pregnancies, that just as we hear the risks grow with age and kind of over 35, under about 2021, they also are pretty high too. But what had happened was that she was just sort of part of a generational thing. Her mother had her at 15, 16. Her grandmother had her mother at, same age. And so she was kind of stuck in this, pattern, right? And she came and when the social workers asked, what would you need? She said, I know this cycle and I want to break it for my child. And so she said, I need to get my high school degree. I need to get that. And so she, worked with the social workers, and the social workers were able to find her a laptop so she could sit by her baby's bedside and do online school.
Oh, that's
and
awesome.
Then they reached out to us, and we were able to pay the tuition for a year-long program that she could do. And it was really impactful to see because, she would screenshot when she got A's and send them to us, and things like that. And to finish that. And, and she very much talks about that, I don't want this same situation for my child. And so how can I do this? There are some ways. And that was for her, that was her first real big step to make sure that that cycle didn't continue. And, I think about that, and I think, definitely in the, cycle breaking, kind of thing that I think is really important. And I think that a lot of us are trying to do for various aspects, and, how we were raised, how previous generations were raised, all of that. I think for me, that was really impactful because it was taking somebody who, didn't go down the right path, or didn't go down the best path, to step back and recognize and say, I have a child now and I want the world to be different for my child. And so this is how I'm going to do this. And I think, we all do forms of that as parents, whatever that looks like. And so, you want life to be better for your child. I mean, that's what we all want, right? And so, I think that was something, and that really sticks out to me as, somebody who really, and at a young age, recognized, a cycle and recognized something and said, I need to stop it. And really took, the steps and asked for the help to get to that, to start to break those cycles. And so I do hope that, she continues to be able to do that, and that life is better for her child, like we all want for all of our children.
Yeah, that's really cool. I mean, first of all, that she would even ask for the help, right? Because that's something that not a lot of 16-year-olds recognize, that they could ask for that help, and how to ask for that help, where to ask for that help. Like, that's really takes a lot to even get to that point. But yeah, I mean, that's going back to wanting more parenting leave and wanting more better healthcare and better everything. I've had people say, well, why do you care? You're not going to, because I've had a hysterectomy, so I can't have more kids. Like, you're never going to need the parenting leave. Why do you care? Why would you vote for this issue? I'm like, because I want my kids, if they have kids, to eventually be able to take advantage of that. Like, that's something that I do feel like I want better options than what I had. And even if I'd had everything pretty perfect, I still feel like I want better for my kids than I have. Like, I feel like it's a very natural thing to want for your kids, right?
Absolutely. For sure. Right. I refer to it like not being diagnosed with anxiety until I was 30. If my son has an anxiety disorder, which could be likely, there is some genetic components to it, I want him to be diagnosed as soon as we possibly can, and to be getting the resources and the treatment and everything like that as soon as possible. I hope he doesn't have those issues, but if he does, I want it to do that. And I think, it's all of those kinds of things that we want, right? Because I think about this and I think, I'm 41 now. And so I've only been diagnosed officially with anxiety and been treated for it for, 10, 11 years. And, I look back on things now and I think how different I would have been had I been getting the help that I needed, even 5 years previously, 10 years previously, right? All of those kinds of things. I think those are really important. So yeah, I think that that's really where we have to go from, right? It's the same way of like, when you hear issues and people say, well, it's not going to matter to me. I'm like, do you have children? Do you have grandchildren? Like, it's going to matter to them. So, let's start thinking about that.
Even if you don't have kids, like, do you have nieces, nephews? Do you have a cousin that you love?
Right. Do you have a human being that you love that's in a younger generation? Like,
Or maybe you don't and you're just curmudgeon-y, whatever.
Right.
Yeah. Right. Well, it is time for the magic moment of the stream. So this is my magic wand, and it glows and everything, and Tyrion really likes it. If you could wave a magic wand and eliminate one common opinion, misconception, or theory surrounding mental illness, disabilities, or talking about mental health, what would it be?
I think that we talk about it and then we don't. The mental health isn't a negative term. I think we all have mental health, right? Just as we have physical health, we all have mental health. And some of us have more complex situations that we navigate every day, and some of us don't. And that's okay, but we all have those kinds of things. So I think if we could just stop making mental health sort of equivocate negatively or, all of that, and to say how natural it is for a lot of people to have some struggles, and on varying degrees. I think that would be amazing that we do this. I think that everybody in the world should go to a therapist. I really do. I think life is tough. I think we navigate a lot of different things. And I think having that space to really reflect and talk to somebody and to have a professional who can intervene if they needed to is really key. And so I firmly believe everyone should go to therapy. I tell everyone they should go to therapy. And that's not a negative thing. I think that's just, this is how we're going to navigate and deal with life and our mental health. And so I think if we can take out a lot of that stigma, I think that would be my magic wand moment to do that.
Yeah. I have talked about all the time that we should treat therapy like the dentist. You go twice a year, whether you think you need it or not, just for a check-in. And I do that with my 9-year-old. He doesn't. So my 16-year-old goes to therapy on a regular basis. And with my 9-year-old, it's just like, hey, you're going to go meet with this therapist. And it's the same therapist that my 16-year-old goes to. And like, you're just going to go meet with her and just check in. Like, just answer whatever questions she asks, and it's going to be all good. And, fortunately, he hasn't really needed to go for any particular reason. But it's just like, just go. Just talk to them. See how things are going. See if there's anything that they can help you with or help you think through even. Like whether or not to murder your cat. I would never. We're going to need a lot more therapists for therapy for everyone. You're not wrong. You're not wrong. That is true. And we need, but that goes back to health insurance. Like health insurance sucks for therapists. Make it better so that we can have more therapists who don't get tired and burnt out from having to deal with the stupid bullshit that comes with healthcare. Like, it all
absolutely,
goes back to it.
100%. Yes.
Frost says, I don't have a question per se, but I love the words your guest uses. They remind me a lot of my mom, and I love my mom. Aw, that's awesome.
Oh, that's good. I was like, they remind you of your mom, and I was like, that could go either way, but I like that. Yeah, I love it.
Yes. Frost loves his mommy. That's good. Well, I'm going to go ahead and open it up to the community for any remaining questions. And then, Michelle, if you have anything that you want to talk about as far as resources that you want to throw out there, I will post your links one more time as well, so that if anyone wants to connect with you on socials or through your website, they can find you there. But I'll just give you the floor for a minute and let you talk about whatever you'd like to talk about.
Yeah, absolutely. Definitely. You mentioned in the bio, but really our capacity to give is based on the money we have. And so every little bit counts. We have set up our organization so that we have donors who cover our overhead expenses. So things like the web, the website and all of that. And so all of donations go directly to families in need. So there's not any overhead, any admin costs that donors are paying for. And, really doing this. I also would say, in some of this, asking for resources and things like that. I try to keep a pretty robust resource directory on our website. And so I always invite people to look there for anything that you need, and to also let us know if there's anything, of a resource. We would love to include it, because I think sometimes it's just a matter of trying to find the right places. And so, everything we put on is something that I have had some experience or knowledge with, whoever we are referring to in this, and doing that. And then we also, love to hear people's stories. I really do think that sharing stories has such power. And so we do have a guest blog series. And so anybody who has experience personally and or professionally in sort of these areas of, pregnancy and fertility, NICU, parenting as a whole, all of it, I think is, we can always use your stories. And I think those are really powerful too. So you can feel free to reach out to me as well on that.
That's great. Well, thank you, Michelle, for being here with us tonight. I really appreciate you just taking the time and of course, just being willing to share your story. It's really impactful. And I hope that this helps at least one person. I'm sure that it will. Bite Mark says, I just want to say thank you so much for being here and for all the good work that you do. And I will echo that as well. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
I hope you enjoyed this chat today about parenting after loss with the incredible Michelle Valiukenas. That conversation to me was just like sharing a cup of coffee with a wise friend. We're all navigating through the unexpected, learning to embrace the messy, and finding growth even in the shadows. And of course, we do that together. Whether you're a parent or not, the lessons we discussed today, resilience, empathy, the power of sharing our stories, all of those are threads that weave through the fabric of our everyday lives. Remember, we're all in this together, just like a community sharing a love for tacos. Some days they fall apart, but the joy is in savoring every bite and learning to pick up the pieces to make something beautiful again. I hope Michelle's insights resonated with you, offered a different perspective, or maybe even sparked a connection to your own experiences. Life is a journey, and we're here to embrace it, even the messy parts, and you're not alone. Before we part ways, a little reminder to hit that like button, subscribe, leave a review if you enjoyed today's episode. Your support means the world and helps our taco-loving community grow. And if you have a topic you'd love to hear about or a guest you think would be perfect for the show, reach out. I love hearing from people. So head over to tacosfallapart.com for a variety of ways to connect with me. Thank you for spending this time with me today, wherever you are listening from. Remember, even when tacos fall apart, we still love them, and I still love you. Until next time, stay true, stay kind, and keep embracing the beautiful, messy journey that is life.